most businesses fail because they run out of money. Would
Yeah,
that be
absolutely.
would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. Forget turnover, forget profit even. It's cash. If you don't have cash to meet bills as they become due, that is when you will fail. Big companies go bust because they simply don't have the immediate financial resources. So, as I say, so there's a phrase that turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. But I always like to add the third part of that, which is cash is reality. Because
Yes.
without cash or cash equivalents that you can actually pay the bills, it doesn't matter if you're turning over 100 million. It doesn't matter if, in theory, you're making 25 million. If you haven't got cash to pay the bills when they're due, then the whole pack of cards comes down. So I totally agree.
You talked earlier about founders and startups. There is a typical type of personality that gets themselves involved in entrepreneurship. Would you be able to describe those characteristics?
Absolutely. I think, well, first of all, you need to have a quite a degree of self-belief, absolute sort of get up and go. Again, as I've already said a few times, it's not that easy. So you need to be prepared to work hard and long, certainly to begin with. But if you look at the traits, they're actually quite similar to sportsmen, certainly top sportsmen, in that if you look at a sportsman, they don't expect to get to be the top tennis player, runner, Formula One driver, whatever it happens to be, as an individual. They do it by training hard, and they do it by getting the right people around them. Trainers, coaches, business agents, all of the sort of the circle around them to direct their career and help them make the right decisions at the right times, as well as having that belief in themselves and that determination and the drive to actually work hard and to achieve and go through the down times and push out the other side and keep pushing. And I think that whilst I was just describing a sportsman, you can see all of those characteristics in good founders and entrepreneurs, I think, in obviously a slightly different way, but the same broad characteristics are there. You have to have, so you don't need trainers and coaches and things in the right way, but you do need advisors and an advisory board and accountants and lawyers and whatever it happens to be to make sure that you're doing things properly and you're building that foundation.
Of course.
And then you absolutely will be working sort of hard, long hours, and it can be stressful looking at what decisions to make and when, and of course that whole issue that we've just spoken about in terms of cash. So I would say that the closest similarity is to a successful sportsman, albeit you might hope that a successful business person might actually have a rather longer time at the top than a successful Olympic athlete that then goes off and has to do something else after they've been at the top for a few years.
Yeah,
But,
I think that's where your management team comes in, because they, at that point, when you're coming towards the end of what is hoped to be a successful career, they're getting you those presenting jobs and the pundit jobs that basically
yes,
that seem to occupy the time of people who have been involved in sports.
in business, of course, you can either sell that successful business and move on and do it all over again. And hey, this time you've got more experience and people believe you more. So all of those things would make it easier. Or, of course, you just carry on in that business and life tends to get easier because you've done the hard work at the outset, but you've got that longer tail, as it were, and you just carry on in that business until you go off and do a Charlie Mullins and decide that's it, guys, and go off and relax somewhere.
Indeed. A lot of people are thinking to themselves, oh, I've got an idea for a business. And you know that story or that old saying that goes, everyone has a book inside them.
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression that nowadays, because we've got so many influencers and people on television saying how successful they've been, and I've got a side hustle, etc., that everybody feels that they've got a business inside them. And my thing is, how do you know whether your business is just a crazy idea or if it really has legs?
You know, the world has changed. So exactly as you say, nowadays, if everybody has a business inside them. Everybody, it seems that, well, that I speak to, has a side hustle going of one size or another, or indeed is thinking of doing something. And they've actually spoken to their employer, and the employer is happy for them to have that side hustle. Whereas if you go back to when I worked for the banks, as I said originally, if I had gone to them and said, by the way, I fancy setting up a business that's going to be doing this, is that all right with you? They'd have laughed at me and said, you're paid to work here, so either work here or resign and go and do what you want.
Of course.
So now employers are much more flexible, and the rule seems to be that as long as you do your job for us and what you're trying to do by yourself doesn't compete or in any way with what you're doing for us, then go and do what you like. And so that makes it so much easier for people to build that side hustle, see if it works, get that traction, and then take that step over into it, as opposed to historically, you used to have to make that decision to take that big jump from going from I've got a paid job into let's hope this works with a complete and utter startup. And likewise, it is so much easier to set up a business, all aided with the internet and everything else. But it is so easy to set up a business and see if it works or get it to start to work than it ever used to be.
Yes, I remember seeing what was it? It was a YouTube video with Jordan Peterson, who's not necessarily a business person. Obviously, I think he's a philosopher by trade, but he seems to be a person that gets asked 1,000,001 different things completely unrelated to his principal role. But one of the things that he did say was that the system of having limited liability was an incredible position to be in, because if you make a mistake and you try something and it doesn't work, as long as you haven't been too foolish, you can literally start again. Mm-hmm. I also saw another entrepreneur basically saying something very similar, that people who have online businesses have a fantastic opportunity, that you just throw something up. If it doesn't work, you take it down again and then throw something else up.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I never really looked at it like that previously, but I could actually see the sense, because what happened in terms of companies, the bigger companies, let's say in the UK, like maybe John Lewis or Marks and Spencer's or whatever, or Virgin or whoever it is, the process for trying new ideas is very slow. It's very convoluted. Whereas the sort of leaner, and you've seen that process in your period of time in your mentorship, that leaner, more agile, more active business seems to be what's really carrying the momentum these days.
Absolutely. And again, as you say, there are so many people that have set up a little business in their garage or in their bedroom, in their mum and dad's house or whatever it happens to be, and it just explodes. And whilst to some extent that's always been possible, using the internet and the profile that can bring you, and getting orders in over the internet, fulfilling it from your garage or your bedroom or whatever it happens to be, depending on the product, is, again, it's just so much easier. I come across companies all the time, but one comes to mind just at the moment, that they were a startup, very limited turnover, and they'd already sold to 18 countries.
Wow.
Literally around the world, purely because of the internet.
Yeah.
And that absolutely wasn't possible historically because of the costs and the difficulties and how would you get a profile, et cetera, et cetera. So it has totally transformed. And I think one thing that we are so lucky in the UK that people don't necessarily understand, the World Bank produces a report every year called Doing Business In report. And it looks at, I think it's about 170 or 180 countries around the world. We are always in about the top 10 countries around the world to set up and run a business. And you can literally phone or online, and 15 minutes later with a credit card, there you are, you've got a limited business. It
Yes.
is so easy. And people don't appreciate that in some countries it takes 6 months to set up a business.
Of course, without a doubt. This is the problem. I think, I always use this as an example, and I've used it here on the Cashflow show many times. The example that you wake up in the morning, you've had a dream the night before, and you've woken up in the morning, and your destiny is to sell, chicken nuggets or whatever it is. And you then wake up in the morning, you think, right, I'm going to start a company called Clayton's Chicken Nuggets. And you can just be in your pajamas and basically open up your laptop, and you can get a website, you can get a domain name, you can get with your credit card, you can get your business set up at company's house, you can get an accounting package, you can get everything before lunchtime. Even before you've had 11s, all of this stuff can be done, and you've got a business. Boom, done. It's amazing, and I didn't actually mean that as a pun, as in Boom and Partners, but it literally is done like that. It's amazing.
Absolutely. But what I would say is come back to the biggest reasons that businesses fail in not investigating the markets properly and not thinking it through and writing a proper business plan and realistic assumptions, etc. Because unless you do that, you're going to be shooting off in the wrong direction. And it's fine if you shoot off in the wrong direction, but you have to accept that, okay, so this isn't going to work. And a year or so ago, I wrote an article for Sifted, which is part of the Financial Times, and they asked me to make it sort of controversial, thought-provoking. And so I entitled it, Why Are Many Founders Fantasists? There you go. And one of the big reasons that founders are fantasists is because they have this "it's my baby" syndrome. And by that, I mean that they get too obsessed with their idea is perfect. They might have 10 people tell them, well, it won't work because, and that reason might even be the same reason. But so many of them still will not listen because, no, it's perfect. So what I would say is, whatever your flash of inspiration in the middle of the night, and whether you set up a business or not, again, I have to repeat, you come back, make sure you investigate that there is proper demand for the product or service that you think at the price that you can deliver it at. Make sure you do the research, and make sure that if people are telling you, well, it would be better like this, that you listen to them, accept the fact that, yes, you might have it broadly right, but you know what, other people might actually be able to help you improve that product or service.
And that's interesting. And the reason why I look at it slightly differently and come to the same conclusion is because when we look at business media, it gives us these figures of people, sadly it's usually men, who are completely focused, as you say, on their own vision. And they are so dogged, and say, Steve Jobs did this and he didn't listen to anybody else and blah, de, blah, de, blah. And look at that, and, Apple's this big company, or Alan Sugar didn't listen to anybody else. He's probably going to ring me up now and give me grief on Twitter or something. And the fact is, it's unfair to Alan Sugar, to be honest with you, because he does actually says, I listen to everybody, but I make up my own mind. A lot of people are taught that being a strong, decisive CEO and leader is, having the vision and following it through. But I also read somewhere that most people who are founders very rarely make good CEOs.
Yeah, it's a very different space to have that vision and that drive to set up a business and then make, as I say, continue to be at the top of that business as it grows and it's employing 50 people, 100 people, 5,000 people, whatever it happens to be, because it's a very different set of qualities, which is why you do see founders very interested in setting up a business, expanding it quickly. The whole reason they set up is to expand quickly, sell out in 5 years, walk away with a chunk of money and do it all over again. And I've had discussions with people that say, but why would you do that? You've thrown so much of your life and passion into building that business. Why would you want to build it only to grow it and walk away from it? But the reality is exactly as you've said. You're not the right person. You actually don't want to be controlling hundreds of staff and and the logistics and everything else that a big business entails. You as a personality are focused on those earlier challenges and making something happen, creating something from nothing, and then moving on and doing it again, or just doing something totally different because you've made that much money. Whatever it happens to be. But I would agree that often that personality trait is different. And if you look at it the other way round, often you will find people that have been very successful in big businesses, try to start their own business, and they just don't get that there aren't hundreds of other people running around behind them, sweeping up, making things happen. They've actually got to do it themselves. Yeah. And again, that's a very different scenario.